table with a quiet thud, right between the mashed potatoes and the green bean casserole. Sunday dinner had always been sacred in our house. For 38 years, Harold and I had gathered everyone around the same mahogany table. But tonight, the air felt different, charged, almost electric. Esme, my daughter-in-law, sat across from me, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her wine glass. Normally, she filled every silence with opinions about the food or the house. Tonight, she simply watched me with a faint, knowing smile. "What's this?" I asked, eyeing the manila envelope that had appeared beside my plate. "Open it," she said coolly, "since you haven't noticed what's happening right under your nose." My son David looked up in confusion. Harold shifted in his chair, his fork clattering against the plate. I caught the pale look on his face, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for water. "Go on, Wanda," Esme continued, settling back as if waiting for a show. "See what your husband's been doing while you've been busy being the perfect hostess." Her words cut like ice, but I kept my face calm. Inside, my heart pounded, not from surprise, but from anticipation. I had been waiting for this moment for 3 months. 3 months of pretending not to know. 3 months of smiling through family dinners, while my husband and his secret thought they were clever. I slid open the flap and pulled out a stack of glossy photographs. Harold and Esme in our guest room, in a hotel, in his car. I covered my mouth and let out a soft gasp. "Oh my! Harold, how could you?" David's chair scraped against the floor as he shot to his feet. "What is going on here?" Harold looked at me, guilt and fear flickering in his eyes. "Wanda, I can explain." "What's to explain?" Esme interrupted with a careless laugh. "Your father and I care about each other. It's time everyone knew." Silence swallowed the room. David stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Harold looked ready to sink through the floor. I kept playing my part, the wounded wife, perfectly. "How long?" I whispered. 6 months, Esme said with a satisfied tilt of her head. I almost smiled. I knew it had been closer to 8. Harold had never been good at hiding anything. I pushed back my chair. "I need some air," I said, my voice trembling just enough. David reached for me, but I waved him off and stepped toward the kitchen. Instead of going outside, I stopped around the corner where they couldn't see me, but I could hear every word. "You didn't have to be so cruel," David said, his voice thick with disbelief. "Oh, please," Esme replied. The tables turned. "Your mother deserved the truth," Esme said, her voice like glass. "She's been smiling for months, pretending everything's perfect, while her husband fell for someone else. I did her a favor." "A favor?" David's voice cracked. "You've wrecked 2 marriages, my parents' and ours." "My parents' marriage was already gone," she replied with a shrug. "And ours? That was never real." Harold cleared his throat. "Esme, maybe we should..." "Should what?" she snapped. "Pretend none of this happened?" We agreed. "No more hiding." "You are hiding," David shot back, his words sharp enough to cut. Pride swelled in my chest. "Careful," Esme warned, her tone dropping to a quiet threat. "Think about how you speak to me." "I have more photos, images your business partners might find enlightening. Harold told me all about those little side deals." My stomach tightened. Now she was threatening my son. That changed everything. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder labeled Insurance. 3 months of patient investigation ready to strike. Stepping back into the dining room, I faced them. Esme's smile was pure triumph. "You know what, Esme?" My voice was steady. "You're right. I was blind." Her smile widened. "Finally, some honesty." "Yes," I said, turning my phone toward her. "Let's be honest." The color drained from her face. On my screen was not Harold and Esme, but Esme with a stranger. Same hotel room. Taken just 2 weeks ago. "What?" Her words faltered. "His name is Marcus Thompson," I said calmly. "Ring any bells?" Esme's wine glass slipped, red spilling across the floor like a warning. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" "Because according to the public records I pulled, Marcus Thompson is your husband, the one you married in Nevada 3 years ago, the one you told everyone was dead." Her carefully built story collapsed in an instant. Eyes wide, she swayed and dropped to the floor in a dead faint. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. The game had just begun. 3 months earlier, I was folding laundry when Harold's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have looked, but the preview on the lock screen made my heart stop. Can't wait to be with you again. 42 years of marriage undone by a single text. E. There was only one E in our lives. Esme, my daughter-in-law. I sat on the edge of the bed, shock turning to a cold, focused calm. How many family dinners had I hosted while they shared secret looks? How many times had I welcomed her with open arms while she betrayed us? The phone buzzed again. "Harold, your phone," I called, keeping my voice even. He didn't hear over the shower. I picked it up. Same passcode we'd used for decades, our anniversary date. My hands trembled as I entered the numbers. Inside were months of messages and photos, plans for hidden meetings, and cruel jokes about me. But one image caught my eye, a blurry marriage certificate with obvious flaws. I saved it. The next morning, with Harold golfing and David at work, I finally had Esme alone. That was the moment I started building my own case. The hidden past. Esme stopped by to return a few books, moving through my kitchen as if she owned the place. "Coffee?" I asked lightly. "Sure, make it strong, I barely slept," she said without looking up, thumbs flying across her phone. "I'll bet you didn't," I thought, but only smiled. "Oh, everything okay?" For an instant, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt or calculation? "Just thinking about things," she replied vaguely. I handed her the mug. "You know, I realize we don't have any photos from your first wedding." To Marcus, the cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the tile, hot coffee spreading across the floor. "Sorry," she blurted, startled. But I had already seen the flash of fear on her face. Pure, unmistakable fear. "Don't worry," I said, reaching for paper towels. "These things happen. But about those pictures—" "Marcus died in a car accident," she interrupted quickly, crouching to help. "It's too painful to look at old photos." "Of course. I'm so sorry," I murmured. But inside my mind was racing. Her story had never added up. She'd appeared in my son's life with almost no past, and I had accepted her explanation as grief. Now I wondered if something else was hiding there. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. 3 weeks later. James Morrison's office was small but professional. He listened carefully, taking notes in a leather notebook. "What exactly are you hoping to find, Mrs. Patterson?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "Who Esme really is, and whether Marcus Thompson is truly gone." When he finally called me back, his expression was grave. "Mrs. Patterson, you need to see this." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents, photos, and records that stole my breath. "Marcus Thompson isn't dead," James said quietly. "He's alive in Phoenix, and still legally married to Esme." Shock chilled me. "She married your son while still married to Marcus. And she's done this before. Twice that I can confirm. She targets men with money, wins their trust, and disappears with whatever she can take. Mr. Thompson lost his house, his savings, even his business because of her." I stared at the evidence, stomach twisting. "She's a skilled con artist," James continued. "She changes her name. Emily, Emma, Esme. Always a new story. Always claiming to be a widow. And lately, she's been gathering details about your son's company and your family finances." My hands clenched. She wasn't just threatening my marriage. She was after everything we'd built. "There's more," James said. "Marcus has been searching for her. He's ready to press charges for theft and fraud. Other victims will testify too." I looked down at a photo of Marcus. Kind eyes, gray at the temples, holding an old picture of Esme when she looked softer, almost innocent. "Can you arrange a meeting?" I asked. 2 days later, I waited in a quiet downtown cafe. When Marcus Thompson walked in, I recognized him instantly from the photos. But what struck me most was the weariness in his face, the heavy look of someone who'd carried betrayal for far too long. "Mrs. Patterson?" he asked cautiously. "Please call me Wanda," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming." As we sat, I studied his tired but hopeful eyes. At last, the truth about Esme was beginning to surface. The truth unravels. "I have to ask," Marcus said after we ordered coffee. "Is she calling herself Esme now?" "Esme Thompson Patterson," I confirmed. "She married my son 2 years ago." Marcus's shoulders sagged. "She's married again." "Of course she is," I said gently. "Please, tell me everything. What she did to you, who she really is." For the next 2 hours, Marcus described the woman who had swept into his life 5 years earlier as Emma, claiming to be a grieving widow. She was charming, attentive, impossible to resist. She took everything, he whispered. My savings, my house, even family heirlooms. One morning she was just gone. Did you go to the police? I asked. I tried, but she was careful. Everything looked like a gift. Joint accounts, property transfers. Legally, it was airtight. I reached across the table and touched his hand. What if we could stop her together? A spark lit his tired eyes. What do you have in mind? As I outlined my plan, hope began to replace the defeat in his face. For the first time since discovering Harold's betrayal, I felt something stronger than anger. Purpose. Morning clarity. The next day, I woke with a clear mind and a sharper resolve than I'd felt in months. I found Harold in the kitchen, reading the newspaper with his usual calm, yet the slight tremor in his hand betrayed him. Harold, I said, pouring coffee slowly, we need to talk. He looked up, panic flashing before he forced a neutral smile. About what, dear? About Esme. The paper crumpled in his grip. What about her? I sat across from him, holding his gaze. How long have you known her real name isn't Esme Thompson? Color drained from his face. The newspaper slid from his hands. I don't know what you mean, he stammered. Her real name is Emily Morrison, I continued evenly. Before that, Emma Daniels. And on her marriage certificate to Marcus Thompson, Elizabeth Margaret Sawyer. Harold's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You knew, I said quietly. Didn't you? He buried his face in his hands. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. For a long moment, the only sound was the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, Harold looked up, fear shining in his eyes. She's blackmailing me, he whispered. I hadn't expected that. Blackmailing you? How? 3 months ago, she came to me with old photos. Proof from 20 years ago. His voice shook. The Henderson deal. I remembered the name faintly. A property development from David's college years. What about it? There were irregularities, Harold said, staring at his hands. Paperwork filed wrong. Inspections rushed. Everyone involved knew, including city officials. It was how business was done back then. But now, with today's regulations, it could mean serious charges, fraud, bribery, maybe worse. My stomach tightened. How does Esme know any of this? He gave a bitter laugh. She charmed a man who worked on the project, Rick Morrison. He kept copies of everything. When he died last year, she inherited the files. She knew exactly what she had. So she came to you. She promised to stay quiet if I helped her get close to David, Harold admitted, voice cracking. She wanted to marry into our family, gain access to our finances, our circle. She said she'd vanish after a year or two with enough money to start over. And you agreed? What choice did I have? His whisper barely carried across the table. A dangerous plan. If those documents ever surface, I'll lose everything, Harold said, his voice raw. The business, the house, our reputation. You and David would go down with me. I stared at the man I'd shared 40 years with and wondered if I'd ever truly known him. So you sacrificed our son's happiness to save yourself, I said coldly. To save all of us, he insisted. I thought I could manage it. Keep her satisfied with small gifts, a little money. I never meant for it to go this far. This far meaning the affair? Harold flinched. That wasn't part of the plan. She made me feel young again. I know how pathetic that sounds, but it's the truth. When did you realize she wanted more than jewelry and cash? A month ago, he admitted. She started asking about David's business, our investments, the value of the house. She wanted me to convince David to make her a partner. That's when I knew I was in over my head. A cold fury settled over me. And you still said nothing. You were going to let her destroy David's life to protect yourself. I was trying to find a way to stop her, Harold pleaded. I swear, the only solution you looked for was in her bed. He broke down, sobbing. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I felt no sympathy, only a sharp, calculating clarity. Harold, I said evenly, you're going to help me stop her. He wiped his eyes. What? You heard me? We're going to expose her and protect David, and you'll make sure she can't hurt anyone else. I can't. If she releases those documents, she won't, I cut in, because by the time I'm done, she'll have far bigger problems. Harold stared like he didn't recognize me. What are you planning? What I should have done the moment I found out. I'm taking control. She's dangerous, he warned. Not just a social climber. A professional con artist. She's ruined other families. If you cross her... If I cross her, what? I turned, and whatever he saw in my eyes made him shrink back. She'll try to destroy you. She already has, I said quietly. She's taken my husband, manipulated my son, and turned this family into her playground. What's left to lose? Your freedom, he whispered. If you do something illegal... I'm not doing anything illegal, I replied. I'm doing something worse. I'm going to tell the truth. Before he could respond, my phone rang. James Morrison. The investigator's warning. Mrs. Patterson, James said when I answered. I have news about Miss Sawyer. You'll want to hear this in person. An hour later, I sat in his office as he spread a new set of documents across his desk. Harold had begged to come. I refused. This was my fight. What did you find? I asked. More victims, James said grimly. Many more. Law enforcement in 3 states confirms she's been running this same scheme for nearly a decade. Wealthy older men, often married. She gains their trust, then uses blackmail and manipulation to access their finances. My stomach turned. How many? At least 8 confirmed, possibly more. The losses total millions. I felt sick. What happened to them? 2 took their own lives, James said quietly. Others lost everything. Businesses, homes, families. She's careful, always making sure the legal trail points to her victims instead of herself. But you said law enforcement is involved now? They are. The FBI has been tracking her for a year, but she's careful. They need something undeniable. Proof that ties her different identities together and shows intent. What kind of proof? They need her to admit it, James explained. To someone she trusts. Someone she sees as a threat she can still manipulate. I understood immediately. You want me to wear a wire. The agents believe you're the only person who fits. You know her true identity, yet she still sees you as someone she can outplay. If you can get her to talk about the others, she'll incriminate herself. He leaned forward, voice low. But Mrs. Patterson, this is dangerous. Very dangerous. The setup. If she even suspects you're working with law enforcement, there's no telling what she might do. James's warning echoed in my mind as I drove home. I thought of Harold's confession, of the 2 men who'd chosen despair rather than face the ruin she caused, of my son, still unaware that the woman he called his wife was quietly planning to dismantle everything he'd built. When do we start? I asked. For the first time since we'd met, James smiled. I'll make the call. For months I'd felt powerless, pretending life was normal while my family splintered. Now finally, I had a weapon. Esme believed she was the hunter, pulling every string. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Inside the bureau. The FBI's Pittsburgh field office looked nothing like I expected. Plain walls, humming fluorescents, the faint smell of stale coffee. Agent Sarah Chen, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, led me to a small conference room. Mrs. Patterson, she said, I want you to understand exactly what we're asking, and the risks. I understand the risks, I replied. Will this stop her? Agent Michael Torres slid a thick folder across the table. This is everything we have on Elizabeth Sawyer, also known as Emily Morrison, Emma Daniels, and now Esme Thompson. Nearly a decade of cons. We estimate she's taken close to $3 million. I opened the folder. Page after page of photographs stared back. Men I'd never seen, but all with the same hollow look. Broken. Some images were mug shots. Others looked like they'd been taken at funerals. These are her victims? I asked. The ones we can confirm, Agent Chen said. Robert Harrison, 62, lost his construction company and took his own life after she disappeared. Michael Chen, no relation, lost his savings and family. He's now serving time for embezzlement after she convinced him to steal from his own company. I turned another page. More faces, more ruined lives. How is she still free? She never technically steals, Agent Torres explained. She convinces her targets to hand over money voluntarily, gifts, investments, joint accounts, and she always ensures they're complicit in something shady. so they can't go to the police without risking themselves, just like she's done with your husband. Agent Chen leaned forward. Your situation is different. You uncovered her real identity before she could finish the con. She's not expecting resistance. That gives us an opening we've never had. What exactly do you need me to do? We'd equip you with a small recording device, Torres said. You'll need to draw her out, get her to talk about her other scams and past identities. A single admission about one of those crimes would let us arrest her and connect the rest. How do I make her confess? You use her own tactics, Jen replied. She thrives on admiration. Approach her as if you want in on her next move. If she believes you admire her skill, she'll want to show off. It was risky. If Esme suspected I was wired, anything could happen. But looking at the evidence of her destruction, I knew there was no choice. When do we do this? I asked. We'll need a few days to prep and to coach you on exactly what to say, Torres said. Until then, act normal. Don't let her sense a thing. Keeping the mask. Acting normal turned out to be the hardest part. That evening, as I prepared dinner for yet another family gathering, I studied every gesture and smile. Esme played her role to perfection, praising my cooking, chatting with Harold about golf, listening intently as David described his work. She looked every bit the devoted daughter-in-law. But now I knew the truth, and soon so would she. Tension at the table. Now that I knew the truth, every gesture of hers looked different. Every smile felt calculated, every casual question a probe for information. When Esme asked David about his newest contracts, she wasn't making conversation. She was gathering intel. When she complimented Harold on his new watch, she wasn't being sweet. She was taking inventory. Mom, you seem distracted tonight, David said, pulling me back to the present. Just tired, I answered with a practiced smile. It's been a long week. Esme looked up from her pie. For a heartbeat, something flickered across her face. Concern, or maybe suspicion. You have been working hard, she said smoothly. Maybe you should take a vacation. Harold mentioned you've always wanted to see Europe. I met her gaze. Did he now? Harold shifted uncomfortably. I may have mentioned it. How thoughtful of you both to plan my life for me, I said lightly, letting a trace of steel slip into my tone. But I'm happy right here, thank you. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Just a thought. A thought to get me conveniently out of the way, I realized. The test. After dinner, while David said goodbye to Harold in the living room, Esme lingered in the kitchen. Wanda, she said softly, almost conspiratorial, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Have you noticed anything different about Harold? He seems stressed. I studied her carefully. What kind of different? Distracted. Worried. I just worry about him. Stress at his age. She was fishing, gauging what I knew. Time to test her. Now that you mention it, I said slowly, he has seemed secretive. I found some papers in his office I didn't recognize. Her eyes sharpened. What kind of papers? Legal documents. Looked official. Something about property transfers, maybe. That's probably nothing, she said quickly, but I saw the calculation in her gaze. Probably, I agreed. Although some looked old, maybe 20 years. Esme went still. How old? I'm not sure. The paper was yellowed, the typeface different. Huh, she said, trying and failing to sound casual. That is strange. David entered then, and in an instant her perfect wife's smile returned. Wanda, thank you for dinner, she said sweetly, and they left. Closing the trap, I found Harold in his study staring at his computer screen. She's getting nervous, I said, shutting the door. What do you mean? She asked about you, whether you seemed stressed, and she lit up when I mentioned those old legal documents. What documents? I made it up, I replied. But she took the bait. She thinks you might still have evidence about the Henderson deal. Harold paled. If she believes you kept proof, she'll accelerate her plan, I continued. Exactly what we need. We? He echoed. Yes, we, I said firmly. In 3 days, I'll confront Esme about who she really is. When I do, you'll back me up. Wanda, you can't. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to let her keep going. She isn't just after money. She'll destroy David like she's destroyed the others. If we don't stop her, his life will never recover. Harold stared at his hands. What do you need me to do? When the time comes, you tell David everything. The blackmail, how it started. He must know it's not his fault. And us? Harold asked quietly. Our marriage? I looked at the man who had betrayed me and felt only emptiness. I don't know, I said truthfully, but that's the least of our problems now. The final briefing. 2 days later, Agent Chen called. Everything was ready. The recording device was tiny, impossible to spot. They'd chosen the perfect location for the confrontation, a small downtown cafe where the FBI could position their surveillance teams without drawing attention. The stage was set. Soon Esme would have nowhere left to hide. The confrontation. Remember, Agent Chen said as she clipped the tiny microphone beneath my blouse, your job is to keep her talking about the past. Draw her out. Make her believe you admire her skill. If she senses anything off, we stop immediately. Agent Torres added, your safety comes first. Say the code word if you feel threatened. Butterfly. We'll move in. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I drove to the cafe. 3 months of pretending I didn't know about Harold's affair, pretending I trusted Esme, were about to end. For the first time, I felt in control. The meeting. Esme was already there, sitting in the far corner with her back to the wall, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Always cautious, always planning an escape route, but not cautious enough. The cafe bustled with office workers and students, all unaware that a long-running con was about to crack wide open. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Your message was cryptic, she replied coolly. What's this about, Wanda? I ordered coffee, letting silence stretch until it hummed. Somewhere in the room, FBI agents listened, waiting. It's about Marcus, I said at last. Her posture stiffened. Terror flashed before she masked it. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus Thompson, I continued, voice low. Your very much alive husband. Her hand trembled as she reached for her glass. Marcus is dead. No, he's living in Phoenix looking for you. For 3 years. I leaned closer. Elizabeth. She flinched. Her sunglasses slipped just enough for me to catch the panic in her eyes. How did you... It wasn't hard once I knew where to look, I cut in. You're good, Esme. But not perfect. She glanced around the cafe, mapping exits, calculating. What do you want? To talk. No more lies. No more games. I know who you are, what you've done, and what you're planning for my family. You don't know anything. I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward her. Photo after photo. Each one a life she'd shattered. Robert Harrison, I said evenly. Emily Morrison convinced him to steal from his company's pension fund. He took his own life. Swipe. Michael Chen, Emma Daniels drained his retirement and his children's college savings. He's in prison now. Swipe. Thomas Wright, under the name Jennifer Daniels, you persuaded him to mortgage his house. He lost everything and died of a heart attack. Stop, Esme whispered. Why? Because it's easier to pretend these weren't real people? Easier to call it business? Her mask slipped for a heartbeat, then returned, cold and polished. What do you want, Wanda? I want in. She blinked. What? I want in on whatever you're planning next. I'm done playing the perfect wife and mother-in-law. I'm tired of folding laundry while everyone else lives exciting lives. Esme studied me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious. You think I don't know about Harold's affairs? You think this is the first time he's cheated? Please. I let out a dry laugh. I've been looking the other way for 20 years. The trap springs. The only difference, I said evenly, is that this time I found someone who might actually deserve my attention. You're out of your mind, Esme shot back. Am I? Look at what you pulled off. Millions taken from men who thought they were the smartest in the room. You've lived a dozen different lives, been anyone you wanted. That isn't crazy. That's genius. She studied me, eyes narrowing, trying to decide if I was serious or setting a snare. Even if I believed you, which I don't, why would I need a partner? Because you're getting sloppy, I said bluntly. Marcus, for example. Claiming to be a widow before you made sure he was gone? Risky and blackmailing Harold? Messy, complicated? Her gaze sharpened. How do you know about the blackmail? I gave a small, knowing smile. Please, did you really think Harold could keep a secret? He told me everything. The Henderson deal, your threats. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. But here's what I don't get. Why go through all that trouble when there are easier ways to get what you want? Harold isn't the one with real money in this family. I am... That caught her. What do you mean? My father left me a trust fund, $3.2 million. Harold has no idea. He thinks we live off his income, but I've been covering our lifestyle for years. A lie, of course, but I needed her hooked. Why tell me this? She asked, curiosity breaking through her mask. Because I want out of this life, and you're going to help me. We take the money, disappear, start fresh, maybe work together on bigger targets. Imagine it. A grieving widow and her trusted friend slipping in and out of country clubs, charity galas, retirement circles, rich men with more cash than sense. For the first time, genuine interest flickered across her face. You're serious? Dead serious. But I need to know I'm partnering with someone who knows the game. Tell me about the others. How did you convince them to hand over their fortunes? And just like that, she began to talk. Her greatest hits. Robert was easy, she said almost fondly. Lonely divorcee. I played the struggling widow with debts. He wanted to be my hero. 400,000 before his accountant started asking questions. That's when I vanished. And Michael Chen? Trickier, married, kids, but a gambling habit. I claimed I had insider tips, enough to cover his debts and set his family up for life. He was desperate to believe. Simple. She was warming to it now, pride in every word, as the recorder hidden on me captured names, numbers, and methods. What about Thomas Wright? I prompted. That was art, she said with a small, satisfied smile. 6 months gaining his trust. Small investments first, always a quick return, until he was convinced of my brilliance. By the time I asked for the big one, he mortgaged his house without hesitation. And then you disappeared. And then, she corrected, I became someone else. That's the beauty of it, Wanda. When you're finished with one life, you start another. What about Marcus? I asked softly. Her expression darkened. Marcus was supposed to be different. My exit plan. But he started digging into my past, asking questions, so I staged my own death. Car accident, falsified reports, planted evidence. As far as the records show, Elizabeth Sawyer drowned in a Montana lake 3 years ago. But Marcus never believed it. Marcus is a fool, she said with a dismissive wave. He hired investigators, plastered social media, even printed missing person flyers. He made it harder for me to move on, to my next target. Her eyes glittered with triumph. Harold was just the doorway. The real prize is David's company. He's built something substantial. Every name, every dollar amount, every method captured by the hidden microphone. Exactly what the FBI needed. A new beginning. And here's the best part, David said, eyes bright with a hope I hadn't seen in months. Marcus wants to meet us. He said none of this would have been possible without you. I set my cup down, the steam curling into the cool afternoon air. He doesn't owe me anything, I said softly. He disagrees, David replied. He said you gave him his life back. For a long moment we sat in comfortable silence, the city stretching out beneath us, sunlight spilling over rooftops like liquid gold. 6 months ago, I'd been living in a house full of lies. Now every corner of this little apartment was mine, chosen, earned, and paid for in hard-won freedom. David reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. I felt a warmth spread through me, stronger than any fear or anger I'd carried. I'm proud of us, I said. We survived her. The sound of traffic drifted up from the street. Ordinary, steady, reassuring. For the first time in years, I believed the world could be ordinary again. Epilogue. That night, after David left, I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere out there, Elizabeth Sawyer, Esme, Emma, Emily, was facing a courtroom instead of a getaway. The FBI had called earlier to confirm her confession on tape had tied together every alias, every stolen dollar, every life she'd broken. Justice was finally catching up. I closed the curtains and turned back to my quiet home, a faint smile on my lips. The game was over. The rebuilding had already begun, and for the first time in a very long time, the future was entirely, beautifully my own. The day of reckoning. I sat in the packed courtroom, the navy suit I'd bought for my divorce fitting more comfortably than I expected. Familiar faces filled the benches. Marcus Thompson, standing taller and healthier than when I'd first met him. Jennifer Walsh, her kind eyes a quiet strength. Families of other victims, each carrying their own scars. Across the room, Esme sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, hair pulled back tight. Gone was the polished charm, the effortless glamour. She looked older now, worn down by months in custody and the weight of her own choices. When our eyes met, her expression hardened, but she didn't look away. One by one, the people she had deceived stepped forward. Marcus spoke first, his voice steady as he described 3 lost years spent believing the woman he loved was dead. Years shadowed by depression and despair. Jennifer followed, telling the court how her late husband died. Convinced he'd ruined his family, and how learning the truth allowed her children to see their father as a victim, not a failure. As each person spoke, I felt the weight of their words settle over the room, a quiet, undeniable testimony to the damage one woman's greed and manipulation had caused. When it was my turn, I rose and walked to the stand. The microphone trembled slightly beneath my fingertips, but my voice did not. "My name is Wanda Patterson," I began. "I am not here because of stolen money. I am here because Elizabeth Sawyer, under many names, invaded my family, betrayed my trust, and nearly destroyed my son's life. She made my home a battleground and turned love into a weapon. Yet standing here today, I refuse to let her define us. My son and I are rebuilding. We are stronger, and we will not be her final victims." The judge listened, silent and intent. When I finished, I stepped down, lighter somehow, as though the truth itself had set me free. Aftermath. The sentencing was swift. Years behind bars, long enough to ensure she would never hurt another family again. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air felt clean and sharp. Marcus thanked me again, his eyes clear for the first time since I'd met him. Jennifer hugged me like an old friend. We all carried our own grief, but we also carried something else. Closure. That evening, back in my apartment, I brewed tea and watched the city lights flicker on. For decades, I had been Harold's wife, David's mother, the quiet force keeping a household running. Now, at 63, I was simply myself. David's words echoed in my mind, to new beginnings. I raised my cup to the window, to the city, to the life still ahead of me. To new beginnings, hard-won, honest, and finally my own. Freedom at last. Jennifer Walsh read a letter from her youngest daughter about losing their home. Robert Harrison Jr. spoke of his father's final months consumed by shame and doubt. When the clerk called my name, I rose and walked to the stand on steady legs. I'd rehearsed my statement countless times, but as I faced the packed courtroom, I let the paper stay folded in my hand. "Your Honor," I began, 6 months ago I thought I knew who I was. A wife, a mother, someone who kept her family together by keeping the peace. I believed my job was to smooth over problems, to look the other way, to protect everyone else's feelings, even if it meant ignoring my own. I glanced at Esme. She stared back unblinking. The defendant taught me something, though not the lesson she intended. She taught me that silence in the face of wrongdoing isn't kindness, it's cowardice. That shielding people from consequences doesn't help them, it enables them. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is speak the truth, even when it hurts. I paused, my voice steady. She didn't just steal money. She stole trust, made people doubt their own judgment, their families, even themselves. That kind of damage doesn't appear on a bank statement, but it's real and devastating. But here's what she didn't count on. Some of us are stronger than we look. Some of us refuse to let her define our story. We take the pieces she tried to break and build something better. The courtroom fell silent. Someone sniffled quietly. I returned to my seat, heart pounding but spirit clear. The judge sentenced Esme, Elizabeth Sawyer, to 15 years in federal prison. As the bailiff led her away, she turned to me one last time. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw it. Defeat. Outside, Jennifer approached. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you," I replied, "for reminding me none of us are alone." That evening, I called David to share the news, then phoned my sister in California, something Harold had always managed to prevent. We made plans to visit next month. Later, I opened my laptop and began my application to community college. It was finally time to finish the degree I'd abandoned 40 years ago. I thought about the woman I'd been, afraid to speak up, willing to accept scraps of affection, convinced that keeping everyone else happy mattered more than my own well-being. She felt like a stranger now. Yes, a part of me pitied Harold, sitting alone in a house that once felt too big for both of us. But gratitude outweighed pity. If not for his betrayal, and for Esme forcing my hand, I might have spent the rest of my life half asleep in a marriage that had died long ago. Tomorrow the sun would rise again, flooding my little kitchen with light and possibility. And for the first time in decades, I would be fully awake to see it. At 63, I was finally free, and I intended to make every day count. Your turn. Now I'm curious. What would you do in my place? Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to start over? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you're ready for more twists and surprises, stay tuned for the next 2 videos on screen. Thank you for watching and for staying with me through every moment of this journey.